All right. Okay, so for the record, could I get your name and title?
Nikki Fried, Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services and a gubernatorial candidate.
So you announced a plan maybe a month and a half ago to tackle affordable housing in the state. Go over for people who don't know what your plan actually entails.
Yeah, look, we have been traveling the state for over a year now, talking to people, listening to what is actually on people's minds on the ground. And what we consistently heard throughout the state, whether I am in South Florida, Central Florida, North Florida, Panhandle, is the affordability of our state, specifically on housing. One, you've got two different types of buckets. You've got the individuals who are renting, who are seeing rents increasing 30, 40, 50, 60% in some areas. But you're also seeing, those same groups of people that are no longer able to save money to potentially get that American dream of home ownership. And those that are in homes can't afford to stay there, whether it is increasing the value of the homes and they're seeing their property insurance increasing, their property taxes on top of everything else, and people not able to afford getting into a home, whether you're just graduating from school, moving into the state, or those who are trying to retire here. So we thought through all of these different issues and came up with a comprehensive plan. First and foremost, we say on day one of a Fried administration, we are declaring a housing emergency, because that is exactly what it is. It is an emergency. Earlier today, I got a text message from somebody that I met on the campaign trail who said, I need help. I'm getting evicted because I can't afford my rent increase. And we have no plan for her. We have no plan for these families. So we state a state of emergency. This allows us to immediately take resources out of our reserves, start putting it towards building more affordable homes, which has been gutted every single session since the start of Jeb Bush, in the tune of $2.3 billion. $2.3 billion that has been gutted from our Affordable Trust Fund. Why do we think we have a housing shortage? Because affordable housing hasn't been built. And that means both Jeb and Charlie and Rick and Ron have all gutted it. So that's first and foremost. We start building more homes. Two, we start working with our local governments and actually looking at ways to help our locals on whether it is going after predatory landlords, because that's what this is. This is complete greed. This isn't inflation. Inflation's at less than 10%. This is greed. So allowing our local governments to be working, creating their own local plans. Tallahassee has time in and time out, has continued to handcuff our local governments from doing what's right for their communities. Also making sure that when we have a state of emergency, that I'll be able to allow the attorney generals and the attorney general and state attorneys across the state to start going after these individuals who are predatory landlords in our state. So also looking at ways in which we are putting a constitutional amendment on the ballot, increasing our homestead exemption from $50,000 to $100,000. This will be the largest tax cut in Florida's history, and it's going to happen under a Fried administration. But these are important times in our state, and unfortunately, no one in Tallahassee is talking about it. No one in Tallahassee has come up with ideas and solutions. I wish I was governor already, because this would be already on the forefront. I've been asking our current governor to issue a state of emergency, and he is just not understanding what is happening here.
I do want to ask about your plan, because I know you would direct your attorney general to label those 10% hikes as price gouging and to halt rent hikes, I believe, in general. Does the attorney general of Florida actually have that kind of power to wield?
Under a state of emergency, they would. And that's why it's so important that we declare a state of emergency for housing, because then it allows us opportunities to kind of go outside of the norm, because we're in an emergency. And so under a state of emergency, additional powers gets created under the executive branch. But we needed somebody in that governor's seat who cares about the people of our state to be doing something like this and doing everything in our power, because that's what it takes. It is everybody rolling up their sleeves, utilizing all the resources that are available to make sure that people that are living here in our state, I'm not even talking about the people that are moving in, the people that are living here in our state are hurting. And it's unfortunate because we don't have people in Tallahassee who are listening.
And I know there is a disconnect sometimes, because I think Floridians, they intrinsically know that we live off of tourism. It's a huge industry. We also live on people who come here, tourism, and then they go from tourist to Floridians later, and they love the scenery. And so them being there, them being here anyway, helps to expand the economy, but the roads, the infrastructure for them, the housing to accommodate, I can't tell you the amount of times I've heard some viewers in just some normal conversation I have with them on the traffic on the Suncoast, that you've probably noticed here, where they'll tell me, they just put up an apartment, 96 people, but we still have the same roads. So now we have X amount more cars. It's something that, as somebody who grew up in South Florida, both you and me, because I was in Palm Beach, I have not seen the county that has the perfect solution.
You're right. And part of the problem is that we used to have a statewide coordinating committee that used to look at, it was like called community outreach, I think of something of that nature, that basically used to create the roadmap for expansion in our state. They would pull in your local governments in the areas where you're starting to see the growth and where people are moving to. And you get around the room and you start to look through, okay, we're seeing density increases in Suncoast area. I'm seeing density increases in Seminole County. Okay, well, let's work together as a collective unit to figure out where we should be zoning for housing and where we should be putting additional resources, both at the state, local, and now federal level, because we're getting all this infrastructure money coming down now from the federal government. Where should we be looking at this money to make sure that we are adding the right infrastructure? And that's not just roads, that is irrigation, that's water, that's all the other things that go into making sure that there is sustainability for the people that are living here. And that includes also when people are moving into areas that have children, are schools going to be able to hold all of the amount of people that are moving into these areas? But when you're doing this hodgepodge approach, and local governments are not as much as seats at the table, you have, okay, well, we're going to go sell this farmland and to a developer, and they're going to develop, another, 1,500 acres. But yet they're not talking to local government saying, wait a second, we need to make sure that there's a right amount of food stores, that they're not creating a food desert, that you're not creating an area where there is no access to all of these other different services that are necessary. But when you have a governor who is understanding that we've got to look at the state in totality, where are people moving to? I mean, even, you're right, I'm from Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade continues. I was driving down there by Coconut Grove and the Gables a couple of weeks ago, and they're building these huge new high rises right off of US 1. And I'm thinking, wait a second, how in the world are we going to put these people in this area, which is already bumper to bumper traffic, no matter what time of the day it is? And the same thing, in Fort Lauderdale, right off of Las Olas, another popular area. They put up 3 new high rises, and those are one road streets. And so you already are seeing congestion in those areas. But if you're not putting together a master plan for the state and working and empowering local governments to be working with us, you're going to have these issues. And unfortunately, as Commissioner of Agriculture, I'm also very concerned about what that does to our farmland. We feed 150 million people, not just in the state of Florida, but across the entire country. If farmland in the state of Florida goes to the wayside for development, we're going to have a food shortage in our country. And that's not, I'm not saying that lightly, because it's something that I lose sleep on every single day, which is why we are looking at other ideas. But at the end of the day, we need to keep farmland inside of farmland and not have these enticements to sell their land, which is definitely more lucrative than their farming business. So there's a lot of things that have to be done, but if you don't see leadership at the top who is understanding these issues, understanding what needs to happen, then things like this are happening. And I just finished a roundtable with a tremendous amount of locals here in the Suncoast area. And the one consistent thing that I heard is development. And how do we stop the development and slow it down? Because we just can't, the infrastructure is just not here for it.
And before I get into what the special session did, I just want to go on one more point on your plan, which is I feel like if you want to talk about, and you, I mean the general you, if anybody wants to talk about affordable housing in Florida, they have to become accustomed to the Sadowski Fund. And you talked about the sweeps to it and how there's been less money that can actually be allocated to affordable housing. And correct any parts of this that I have wrong, but I believe now it's a 9.7%, but the promise now is that it won't be swept in the future. You have promised to, okay, so first question is, do you believe that? Okay, and second, just based on your reaction, and second, how can we get the legislature then to increase that number instead of level it?
Yeah, first of all, I don't believe them. They have been saying that for 20 years and it hasn't happened. And they continue to say it even this past legislative session. And so what they did was, oh, we're not gutting it. We are moving it. They took $100 million and moved it over to create this heroes trust account of some sort, so that basically first time homeowners that are, I think, first responders and teachers could buy a home. But when you break down the amount of money, it's like equated to like 9,000 people. And so those are the only people that are going to be able to be helped. And it's not about building homes, and great that we can help them with their down payment, but if they can't afford the house going forward, then it completely is a waste of time. And so they continue to play this shell game, trying to get those clickbaits and to try to get that headline of, oh, we're looking out for our first responders, to our heroes, but yet it's really not doing a service to the people of our state. And so how we hold the legislature accountable is, I will not sign a budget that touches a single cent from the Sadowski Fund. And so we start with that conversation and start kind of moving forward on, it needs to be increased. We have all of these reserves. And let me tell you, we have reserves because of the amount of money that came down from the federal government during this pandemic. So as Ron DeSantis wants to keep talking about inflation and blaming it on Biden and blaming it on Washington, D.C., he's very happy to take these large checks and hand them out for political favors, and not recognizing and not acknowledging that that money is coming from Washington, D.C., which also allowed them to put more money into reserves because all this money was coming down from the federal government. And so the money is there that can be used, again, in a state of emergency. I'll be able to use some of these reserves dollars to at least get some of this backlog of these, heartbreaking stories of people being kicked out of their homes, and that American dream, which is home ownership, is really slipping through the hands of just so many people here in our state.
Let's turn to the special session. I know we're kind of going tight on time, so maybe 5-ish minutes that we can go. First of all, what did you think about what came out of the special session and got to the governor's desk?
Nothing. They spent 3 days going proposal after proposal. And at the end of the day, they took no amendments that Democrats thought would help onto any of this piece of legislation. They did not find immediate solutions. From what I am hearing from people on both sides, both the insurance side and the attorneys involved and everybody even in the legislature, are saying very clearly, if there is a positive impact, there is a big if there, you won't see it for another 18 months. We started hurricane season this week. The stories that I'm hearing from people who couldn't find insurance, or their insurance rates were going through the roof, or their insurance policies decreased types of coverage, they didn't address any of those issues. And unfortunately, this has been a ticking time bomb for years. It wasn't just like all of a sudden the insurance marketplace, fell apart and we are seeing these increases. So they should have been able to, the last couple of years, know that this was on the horizon. I brought it up at every cabinet meeting, asking our Office of Insurance Regulation Commissioner, what is happening here? What needs to be done? What are some of your proposals to ease this market? I have been asking those questions for years. And unfortunately, they did nothing during this legislative session. They passed something during the special session, which unfortunately isn't going to help homeowners today. And that is a major, major concern.
We've been doing a lot of coverage on the affordable housing crisis in Florida. And I spoke with Mark Friedlander of the Insurance Information Institute. I wanted to get his opinion too. So I want to run by his analysis of what he saw and then just get your opinion on it. He said that I could cite him on this. It's a bit of a mouthful, so bear with me. He said, the special session was supposed to be a first step towards stability of Florida's property insurance market, but it fell far short of what was needed to help insurers and homeowners, at least in the short term. We learned today that 4 to 5 Florida residential insurers may be unable to secure the level of hurricane season reinsurance coverage to continue operations. Most likely, these companies will have their financial stability ratings withdrawn and be placed in receivership, the first step toward liquidation. If these companies go insolvent, it will be the first or largest, pardon me, mass failure of property insurers in the US since 1992, when 7 domestic insurers failed after Hurricane Andrew. It's a tragedy that could have been prevented if the Florida legislature had acted earlier and passed bolder legislation. It does touch on some of your points, particularly the short-term relief, because I mean, I understand, even as somebody who lives in a home as well, that the long-term relief could be fantastic, but the short-term relief is going to really, really hurt. So, and I understand when people tell me that. But your opinion of the analysis, I know it touched on some points you made some others. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's spot on, and I think that what his analysis is correct, and he's also correct that, we saw the insurance market in Florida is difficult. It is very difficult. I mean, and I lived through Hurricane Andrew in Miami, and I saw the aftermath of what went down, and the insurance companies not being able to cover the claims, and people going bankrupt, and homeowners being left literally with nothing and no insurance to cover them. And unfortunately, that's when created Citizens came after Hurricane Andrew as supposed to be the insurance of last resort. So if we got ourselves into a situation where we didn't have enough insurance carriers, then you can go to Citizens. Unfortunately, when you see Citizens is a government program, and unfortunately, when you see too many policies inside of Citizens, and then you have what's called the CAT fund, which is the reinsurance market for Citizens, and everybody, it's going to get very technical into the weeds, but all of our insurance companies have to buy what's called reinsurance. It's basically insurance for the insurance companies, and they all have to buy into the CAT fund, which again is a public entity. And so when you see that you have so many policies that are in Citizens, it shows you that we have an unstable market in the insurance marketplace, in the private market. And the other problem is it is not the same coverage. And then if a hurricane actually hits with such amounts of policies, again, these are government entities, then you are going to see a real drastic impact on Florida's economy and the stability of our marketplace. And that's going to be Floridians holding the bag on these insurance claims because too many have gone into Citizens. And so this is something that we have seen historically. And unfortunately, the fighting between the lobbyists of the insurance market and the trial attorneys have just been battling each other for the last decades. And so nothing has been able to get accomplished. And so this is where the legislatures need to put up their big girl and big boy pants, take the lobby core out of the conversation, get true experts from the industry to come in and say, what can actually make an impact? And until which time that the legislature starts to kind of recognize that they have a responsibility, and it's not a responsibility to the lobbyists, it's a responsibility to the people of our state, we're going to still have issues like this fall through the cracks. And I can go through another litany of issues that they continue to not be able to move on because of the influence of outside sources.
Is there anything else you would like to add about the special session, what came out of it, or your plan in general? Or since we haven't really tackled it specifically, comparisons on affordable housing between you, your two opponents in the primary, or Governor DeSantis, should you face him in the general?
Look, this is the biggest difference between me and those that are in the primary. I'm just not talk. I'm action. I'm somebody who is going to find an issue and find a problem and want to actually solve it. You're not hearing political rhetoric. You're hearing concrete issues and concrete plans. And that is the greatest difference. And when it comes to the current governor, he just doesn't care. If it doesn't impact his political future, and if it doesn't impact his ratings and how people feel about him and his support for his rerun and for his support for running for president, he doesn't care. And so even his push for changing a property insurance and wanting a special session to deal with property insurance, it had absolutely nothing to do with actually helping people. The only reason why there was a special session and the only reason why he was pushing for a special session is to help himself. And when you're looking through the lens of that, of course, we don't get anything accomplished because everybody is out to take care of themselves and their political futures instead of doing what the people voted them to do. Get in there, roll up the sleeves, and do good for the people of our state. I have been doing that not just for the last 3.5 years as commissioner, but my entire life has been dedicated to the service of our people. From my time growing up in Miami, doing soup kitchens and Habitat for Humanity, to my time as a public defender, to my time fighting for homeowners during the foreclosure crisis. So this is not my first rodeo on dealing with the housing crisis. And so if you don't find people who are actually care about the people and want to make a difference and have concrete plans, well, then nothing's going to happen, and we're going to keep having the same conversation in the next 10 years and 15 and 20 years. Nothing is going to change unless we actually try something new.